What's up, everybody? This is the third episode of the season. Like always, you can find me on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, all that sports culture. I also have Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, depending on where you're listening from. I have other outlets to listen on. Just like last week, we're going to do an overview on the Week 9, and then we're going to do a little preview on Week 10. We're also going to go over any updates on my Heisman list, look at the college football playoff rankings. We're going to also look at the conference standings and see how my predictions are looking so far on the season. Basically, your top four handle business. It was close in the Ohio State-Penn State game, which a lot closer than I thought. I honestly thought Ohio State's offense was going to run away with it, especially how Michigan beat Penn State. But it wasn't that case. Ohio State, Penn State, they kept it very close. Penn State and Clifford, he was having a good game up until the last quarter, but that second half was a real turnaround, or that last quarter was a real turnaround for the Ohio State team. JT Milano, I probably messed his last name up, was really the savior for Ohio State. He had 2 sacks, a forced fumble recovery, 2 interceptions, and one of those was a pick six. I mean, that defensive line was nasty, and JT really stuck out. He played a phenomenal game to help secure the win for Ohio State. The only thing that worries me is if there's an offense like that, like Penn State doesn't technically have the best offense in the country, but if they're able to exploit some kind of weakness that Ohio State has, which I didn't watch the game up until the last quarter, so I didn't see too much of what Penn State was doing. I really just seen how Ohio State was coming back and how their defensive line really took over. If another team's able to exploit Ohio State like that, let's say Michigan, or if Ohio State makes it to the playoffs and you have a team like Tennessee in there who has a high dynamic offense, or you have Georgia in there, at first I had Ohio State probably winning it all the way they've been playing. But after this Penn State game, I kind of have the question, if they face another high-power offense, can their defense keep up? A notable blowout, Kent State beat Oklahoma State 48-0. Will Howard for Kent State completely changed that offensive mold. I mean, the way they played offensively is nothing compared to how they've played all year round. And that defense, being one of the best defenses in the Big 12, really, really showed last Saturday. Wake Forest dropping was a surprisable game, and they didn't drop a close one. No, they got ran over 48-21 by Louisville. Whatever has Wake Forest in a hump, and they're in a slump right now, whatever got them in it, they got to figure it out. Their chances for ACC championship is basically over at this point with that loss. USC having a nail-biter with Arizona, 45-37. I liked USC early in the season. That Oregon State game, I questioned their abilities after that game, and I felt like they were going to drop another one. And then the way they played against Arizona, I really feel like eventually they're about to drop a game somewhere along the line. Illinois versus Nebraska. Illinois took care of business. Chase Brown, again, almost 150 yards. I mean, when I said it last week, Chase Brown was the best running back in college football. I still stand by it. I feel like Chase Brown is hands down the best running back in all of college football this year. North Carolina taking care of business over Pitt. They beat Pitt 42-24. Drake May is an absolute monster. I said he was the best freshman quarterback of all of college football this year. He's let alone probably the best freshman, probably one of the best quarterbacks. I have him in my top 3 quarterbacks this year. He went 34 for 44, 388, and 5 touchdowns. This man almost has 2,700 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions all throughout the passing game. Drake May, without a doubt, is a top 5 quarterback in college football this year. Something that I see that helps, this is more of a resume helper. With South Carolina being ranked, that was like, okay, South Carolina's ranked, that helps Georgia's resume. But with Missouri able to play a ranked team and beat them, that also showcases Missouri has potential. So that close game we have doesn't look as bad, but it's still not a great game to have on the resume. But outside of that, everything else kind of looked normal. But when it comes to my comments last week about the championship teams and who's going to win it and who's going to make it, a lot of that got shaken up. The Big 12, basically, I have TCU winning it. Not much change there. I mean, TCU's ranked number 7. Kansas State probably is the only one close enough to have the opportunity to face them. Oklahoma State, they could have a redemption, but Kansas State has to lose. And when you look at Kansas State's schedule, I mean, that's going to be hard. The way they played against Oklahoma State, they got Texas, who's number 24. But I don't see them losing, to be honest with you. If Will Howard is in there at quarterback and they play exactly how they played against Oklahoma State, I see Kansas State winning. Then they play at Baylor and at West Virginia. I don't see them losing either one of their games. And then when they go to the rival in-state game against Kansas, depending on where that team is and depending on if their quarterback is back, then Kansas might have a chance to keep that one close. But they have dropped 3 games in a row. TCU, Oklahoma, Baylor. They have Oklahoma State, and I just don't see Oklahoma State losing another game. So when it comes down to the Big 12, TCU, Max Duggan, I feel like they're going to win it. They have the strongest chance of winning out for the rest of the season. I honestly don't see anybody else on their schedule that they're going to lose to. When you switch over and you kind of switch gears out of the Big 12 and go down to the Big 10 or go up to the Big 10, I had Ohio State being the team that was going to win it. But it really looks very close between Michigan and Ohio State. Now, I love Illinois. I think they've had a phenomenal season. I love Chase Brown. I think he's probably the best running back in all of college football. I've said this multiple times throughout the podcast this year. But I just don't think Illinois has a strong enough team to compete against those 2 powerhouses in the Big Ten. I still have Ohio State winning it out, but I don't think it's going to be as big of a blowout as I thought it was going to be. The Big 12, Oregon is running away with it. There's no doubt about it at this point. I have Oregon's going to win it. Granted, Oregon State's now ranked, so if they continue to stay ranked, that's going to be another great game for Oregon to add to the resume. I don't think there's a team in the Big 12 now that could beat Oregon in how Bo Nix is playing. They have Colorado this week, then Washington, and then back-to-back, in the season, back-to-back ranked games against Utah and Oregon State. Utah's at home. They're going to take care of business. Washington's at home. They're going to take care of business. But then they travel to Oregon State. Oregon State will probably be ranked at the end of the season. And the way Bo Nix has been playing, I don't see them losing. Now, when you go down to the beautiful ACC, they're ran by one team. And that's Clemson. Clemson runs that division. I wish North Carolina would get a little bit more love because their only loss is to Notre Dame, who is 5-3. They face Clemson. I want the Fighting Irish to beat the Tigers so badly. I have so much hope in the Tar Heels, in Drake May. I have them winning the ACC. Drake May's performance has been so uplifting for the program and for their football team. I didn't know how good they were going to be with Sam not coming back and going into the NFL. I didn't know who they would have at cornerback. And with Drake May stepping into that role, he's played phenomenal. And then you go down to the SEC play. LSU, surprisingly, is in the lead in the West, Ole Miss, and then Alabama. So that's going to be a good game to look at, that LSU-Alabama game. Alabama cannot lose any more games for the rest of the season. And then the biggest game of the week for Week 10, Georgia, Tennessee. Tennessee is ranked 1 in the college football playoffs. Georgia's ranked 3, but at the AP poll, Georgia's 1, Tennessee's 3, or Tennessee's tied for 2. Basically, you got an AP number 1 versus a college football number 1. It's going to be a really good game. This is probably going to be the biggest game of the year. I have this being a bigger game than the Ohio State-Michigan game. I have this being a bigger game than the SEC championship, bigger than any of the college football games outside of the national championship. I'm going to leave my prediction out of this game. Every time I make a prediction on a big-time game for a team, they end up losing it. So I'm not going to make a prediction for either one of these teams because I don't want to jinx. I have a terrible habit of doing that. Now, when I look at the college football playoffs, there's not too much of it that I question, to be completely honest with you. I understand Tennessee, I understand Ohio State, I understand Georgia. I even understand why Clemson's at 4 over Michigan. Okay, yeah, Wake Forest, they might not be as good as they were. And Clemson played them close. Maybe NC State's not as good as they say they are, and Clemson played them close. They nearly lost to number 20 team at Syracuse. Okay, maybe their team quality hasn't been amazing. But at the end of the day, these are still ranked teams that they've played. Granted that they're 21, 22, and 20 now. They're all 3 back-to-back. Clemson still beat all 3 of them. Michigan, on the other hand, the only ranked team they beat is Penn State. So when you look at the resume, it's like Tennessee has the strongest. You could argue Clemson has the second strongest. But they've played them so close, it's like you can't say they ran away with it. Georgia, granted, South Carolina is no longer ranked. They were ranked. And they also beat the number 8 team in the country now, Oregon. So when you look at it, and then Tennessee struggled against Florida in the week 3 of the season, but Georgia was able to beat them by 22 points. Georgia's resume doesn't look as bad as a lot of people think. It could be better. It's not amazing. It's not the strongest schedule in all of college football, but their games and their wins don't look as bad as a lot of people think. I like Alabama's ranking. They lost to the number 1 team in the country. I like them sitting at 6. TCU at 7 is pretty respectable. Oregon, I like their ranking because, hey, you lost to the number 3 team in the country. Yeah, you should be in the top 10. USC, I can deal with it. The only one that's kind of questionable for me is LSU. But then again, when you think about it, they lost to the number one team in the country, being Tennessee, but their second loss is also to Florida State, who is not ranked currently. So I don't know how much value you will put on LSU. I would say Ole Miss is more deserving for a top 10 win or a top 10 placement. But it's LSU instead, so I don't respect that too much. UCLA being at 12. Honestly, UCLA could be at 10 because their only loss is to Oregon. I like Kansas State where they're at, Utah, Penn State. I can deal with it all. The only one I don't really like is North Carolina being all the way at 17. They have one of the best quarterbacks, probably the best quarterback this year in college football. They have played pretty good football. I know better football. At point, better football than Utah. Their offense is better than Penn State. But then again, they're like Penn State lost to Ohio State, and Michigan. So their two losses are against top 5 opponents. So I understand why they'll put them at 15. Texas creeps in with 3 losses at 24, with 25 being UCF. That isn't bad. Honestly, I think I'll take Texas out and put in Liberty, just for the case of Liberty is a 7-1 independent team, and Texas is 5-3. I don't know why you would put Texas in there at 5-3, but the committee did, and overall, I think this is one of the better playoff rankings that they've done. And it looks like they went off mostly resume, which I respect. I feel like the resume is a good ordeal to go off of. Now it's kind of hard though when you compare a week 3 team to what they are now in week 8 or week 9, etc. But overall, I respect it. I like it. Now when you look at the week 10 matchups, which are some of the biggest matchups of the year. So Friday night, you have Oregon State versus Washington. That's important for Oregon State to win. Ohio State has an easy game. TCU versus Texas Tech. North Carolina. I'm not saying that Virginia is a good team. I'm just saying that this is an important game for North Carolina because if they want to be considered to be ACC championships or be in that conversation for that championship, they have to continue to run the table. Kentucky, they need a bounce-back game against Missouri. Texas A&M desperately needs to pull something together, and Florida is going to be that team, a good matchup for them to pull it together. Plus, it's at home for Texas A&M. Oregon, they need to continue to run the table. They got Colorado this week. Penn State, in order to keep some kind of reputation on their name, they need to show up at Indiana and play an impressive game. Same thing with Illinois. Even though Michigan State has not shown any poise to be what we thought they were going to be, they need to continue to run the table and make it to the championship game for the Big Ten. The Oklahoma State-Kansas game. Kansas has lost 3 in a row. Oklahoma State has lost 2 out of their, I want to say 2 out of their last 3. So they really need this win. Both teams really need it, honestly. I like Oklahoma State a little bit over Kansas. You got number 20 Syracuse at Pitt. If Syracuse wants to continue to stay relevant, then they need to beat Pitt. Texas, Kansas State. Another big-time matchup for the Big 12. Kansas State, their offense is questionable. You can't put a lot of hope in Kansas State's offense. Texas, if you have Quentin back there, you know what you're getting offensively. This is going to be a really big game. Alabama, LSU. Alabama travels to LSU. LSU has been a lot better than what I thought they were going to be with a brand new head coach. Number 4, Clemson is traveling to Notre Dame. Utah is getting Arizona, who just played USC close, so this could be a good game. You have number 21 Wake going against number 22 NC State. So you had a lot of big time primetime games this week. That's going to really shape up all the conferences. After this week, you're basically going to figure out 2 or 3 of the conferences and who's going to win it all. If TCU wins this one, you're pretty much set in stone. They're going to be in their championship game. Illinois runs the table or wins this week. They're more than likely in. Kansas State, if they win it against Texas, it's probably going to be a rematch versus Kansas State TCU. I see bulling down if both teams wins. I know it's a look ahead. It's week 11. I really don't want to look too far ahead in the future. But like Oregon, after this week, they have Washington. This is a must-win game for them. Kansas State travels to Baylor. But if Kansas State's able to put up a whooping on Texas, I don't think Baylor's going to be much of a challenge. Tennessee then gets Missouri. Depending on how that outcome goes, that could be a close game for Tennessee. If Tennessee loses, their morale might be low. Missouri might have a chance to step in. If Tennessee wins, then Missouri has no chance at all. LSU would then travel to Arkansas. That Oklahoma State will get Iowa State. So there's a lot of, TCU travels to Texas. Same thing with this Texas game. If Texas managed to beat Kansas State, they have a lot of momentum going in. TCU's traveling to them. It's going to be a home game for Texas. That's going to be a really tough one. But that's all for Week 11. That's all for next week's podcast. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the future. Anyways, so my Heisman list, not much changed, honestly, from my Heisman list. I will say Hendon Hooker went up to 1 for me. Matt Duncan went up to 2. C.J. Stroud dropped down to 3. It still stays top 4. It's all the same people. They just kind of changed positions. Bo Nix rounds out the 4. And then you got Chase Brown at 5. I will say Blake Corum, he stays at 6. Will Shipley, Cam Williams, Bryce Young. And then, honestly, no. Now that I'm looking at it, I had Drake May still at 10, but the way Drake May play, Drake is going up to 7, followed by Will, Williams, and Bryce. If Drake May continues to put on this type of performance, he's definitely going to continue going up this list. I just think Chase Brown and Blake Corum, they've had better seasons right now. I just find them more impressive. I like overall running backs. I like running backs who can be 3 down, catch the ball, tough runners, speedy. Basically have it all. And I think that's Chase Brown, Blake Corum. I feel like those 2 guys are the best running backs of college football. Hooker, Duggan, it's going to come down to a neck and neck. Bo Nix, he continues to play like he is. It's going to come down 2 points. When it comes to voting, it's going to be a nail-biter on who's going to win Heisman. All of these quarterbacks this year have been tremendous. Chase Brown, he's been amazing. I don't think this year's committee is going to have a real easy time voting for the Heisman. And if for some magical reason these quarterbacks, all for the next 3-4 weeks of the season, decide to lose every game and drop off, well, Chase Brown, he's at 1,200 yards, 5 touchdowns, and he's basically getting 100 to 150 yards a game. So Chase Brown could easily swoop in and take it all for himself. Not saying he is, but I wouldn't throw him out of the conversation until about week 11, week 12. You know, at that point, you already know. Between week 10 week 11, if any of these quarterbacks or all these quarterbacks drop off and Chase Brown continues to do what he's doing, he could win it. Not saying it's likely, but there's a possibility. Anyways, like always, I appreciate anyone who listens. You can go follow me on my TikTok, on my Instagram, on my Twitter. Every Saturday, I want to mention on TikTok, I will always post every Saturday and Sunday pregame. Do a little pregame for my favorite games of the week, make my predictions, talk a little bit about the games, any new updates and changes, stuff like that. So like always, go follow me on my other socials. It's all at Sports Center, SCP for TikTok, Sports Culture for Instagram, and then for my Twitter, it's at the Sports Hub 28. So, or you can just look up Sports Culture Podcast. Anyways, like always, thanks for listening, and I'll hit y'all next week.